You're not ready for what's about to unfold in this story. A wealthy, well-known man, dressed in luxury, dripping with power, respected in all the wrong rooms, thought he could bury the truth with a checkbook and a signature. He believed silence could be bought, that money could erase the damage done. But what happens when the person you're trying to silence has nothing left to lose? Today, I'm bringing you a story that's not just shocking, it's uncomfortable, raw, and real. It's about a girl who slept under bridges, relied on scraps to survive, and suddenly found herself face to face with a man who used his influence to do the unthinkable. And just when he thought he'd buried it all, fate decided to speak louder. Destiny quite literally refused to stay quiet. Before we go further, I want to talk directly to you. Yes, you, watching right now. You didn't click this video by accident. There's a part of you that wants to understand what really happened here. You're going to find out why a powerful man risked everything to silence someone society often ignores, and why that silence didn't last. You'll feel the tension, the injustice, and the moment the tables start to turn. This isn't just about one man and one girl. It's about the kind of secrets that exist behind designer doors and gated estates. And throughout this story, you'll see how the truth has a strange way of fighting back, no matter how deep you try to bury it. So stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see the world. There's more to this than just wealth and status. This is about control, manipulation, and the cost of speaking out. The man thought he played a master move, but he forgot one thing: even broken voices echo. And as this story unfolds, the silence turns into something far more powerful: resistance. But here's the twist that'll leave your jaw on the floor. When the girl finally got the chance to speak, she said something no one expected. Stick around. You won't believe what comes next. Behind the glittering facade of the city's elite, where the limelight rarely shines on the forgotten, this story truly begins. Not with the rich man, but with the girl whose name the world didn't bother to learn. She was a shadow in plain sight, the kind of person who could walk past you on the street without you ever sparing a glance. Her days blurred into one another, each filled with the cold reality of hunger and the desperate hunt for shelter, a thin blanket, a moment of warmth. She wasn't always like this. Once there was a time when life promised something different, but those pages had long since been torn out. Now her existence was defined by survival, the kind that tests every fiber of a person's soul. Her world shifted the day their paths crossed, the man everyone whispered about but never truly knew. He was the picture of success, his influence stretching like invisible webs into politics, business, and the social circles where power was currency. He had charm, a polished smile, and a network that made his name untouchable. But beneath that veneer lay a darkness few dared to acknowledge. His reputation was spotless on paper, but those who knew him behind closed doors told a different story, one riddled with secrets and shadows. What he wanted from her was clear the moment he approached. Control. To keep his skeletons from spilling out, he believed buying her silence was the only way. Money in hand, he offered her a deal, a lifeline, or so he thought, wrapped in threats thinly veiled as concern. It was the kind of offer that most would find impossible to refuse, especially when the alternative was the harsh streets. But what the man didn't count on was the unbreakable spirit that came from living on the edge, the resilience forged in nights spent under city lights and in the company of strangers who understood pain in ways most never would. This girl had secrets of her own, pieces of a puzzle no one in his world wanted to see completed. What happened next wasn't just about one man trying to silence a girl. It was a collision of worlds so different, yet so dangerously entwined. There were whispers on the streets, stories of corruption, abuse of power, and broken promises. People like her rarely got a voice, but fate, as unpredictable as it is, was about to change that. You'll hear from the people around them, friends, strangers, and those watching from the shadows, each perspective adding layers to a truth too complex for headlines or gossip. Some will surprise you, others will make you question what you thought you knew about justice, privilege, and courage. Meanwhile, the man's own world starts to crack as those closest to him begin to sense the storm brewing. Allies become wary. Secrets threaten exposure, and the fine line between reputation and ruin grows thinner with every passing moment. The pressure mounts not just from outside forces but from his own past, which refuses to stay buried. Meanwhile, the girl's fight is far from over. Her silence is a fragile thing, held together by fear, hope, and an inner fire that refuses to die. As she navigates the complex maze of trust and betrayal, you'll see the lengths some will go to protect what they think belongs to them, and the cost of that protection. This isn't just a story about money or silence. It's about power, survival, and the unexpected ways that truth finds a way to be heard, even when everyone wants to keep it quiet. And as this story unfolds, you'll start to piece together the puzzle with me, understanding how every choice, every secret, and every whispered threat leads to a moment that could change everything. But here's the question you're waiting for. Will the girl's voice be enough to bring down a man who's used to getting his way? Will the weight of money and influence be stronger than the courage born from hardship? Stay tuned, because what happens next will pull back the curtain on a reality most people prefer not to see, and it's going to keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. You're not ready for what's about to unfold in this story. A wealthy, well-known man, dressed in luxury, dripping with power, respected in all the wrong rooms, thought he could bury the truth with a checkbook and a signature. He believed silence could be bought, that money could erase the damage done. But what happens when the person you're trying to silence has nothing left to lose? Today, I'm bringing you a story that's not just shocking, it's uncomfortable, raw, and real. It's about a girl who slept under bridges, relied on scraps to survive, and suddenly found herself face to face with a man who used his influence to do the unthinkable. And just when he thought he'd buried it all, fate decided to speak louder. Destiny, quite literally, refused to stay quiet. Before we go further, I want to talk directly to you. Yes, you watching right now. You didn't click this video by accident. There's a part of you that wants to understand what really happened here. You're going to find out why a powerful man risked everything to silence someone society often ignores, and why that silence didn't last. You'll feel the tension, the injustice, and the moment the tables start to turn. This isn't just about one man and one girl. It's about the kind of secrets that exist behind designer doors and gated estates. And throughout this story, you'll see how the truth has a strange way of fighting back, no matter how deep you try to bury it. So stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see the world. There's more to this than just wealth and status. This is about control, manipulation, and the cost of speaking out. The man thought he played a master move, but he forgot one thing: even broken voices echo. And as this story unfolds, the silence turns into something far more powerful: resistance. But here's the twist that'll leave your jaw on the floor. When the girl finally got the chance to speak, she said something no one expected. Stick around. You won't believe what comes next. Behind the glitz and glamour of the city's shining skyline, where the elite bask in luxury and control, there's an underworld often unseen, where stories like this one quietly unfold. The girl, someone so many would overlook, had a past painted with hardship most don't want to confront. No name, no fame, no safety net, just survival on the streets, day after day, night after night. She was the invisible thread woven into the city's fabric, the quiet pulse that no one hears but everyone walks over. What made her story different wasn't just the struggle. It was what happened when her path crossed with a man who held more power than most could imagine. A man whose image was carefully curated for the public, but whose private life was full of shadows and secrets. He was someone people whispered about in private circles, a VIP whose influence reached into the highest offices, whose wealth seemed endless. To the outside world, he was untouchable, a titan who could make things happen with a nod. But beneath the polished veneer, there was a darkness that few saw. He knew the rules of power better than anyone, including the unspoken one about how to handle those who threatened to expose the truth. Money was his weapon, silence his goal, and the homeless girl his latest challenge. When their worlds collided, it was unexpected for both. For her, it was a moment of fear and confusion. How could someone like him even notice her? And for him, it was a calculated risk, an attempt to keep his reputation spotless at any cost. He offered her a sum that could change her life, but it came with a demand. Never speak of what she saw, never reveal the truth behind the mask. It was an offer wrapped in threats, a gamble of power versus desperation. Most would have taken it and vanished into the night, but she was different. There was a fire inside her, a spirit hardened by years on the edge that refused to be bought or silenced. But here's the thing about silence. It's never truly silent. It grows heavy, builds pressure, and eventually breaks in ways you least expect. As days passed, the tension between them thickened, and the city's shadows seemed to watch silently, waiting. The girl's world began to change in subtle ways. New faces appeared in her life, some offering help, others watching her like vultures circling a fragile prey. Meanwhile, the man's world started to crack at the edges, his carefully constructed empire showing signs of strain. Behind closed doors, allies whispered doubts, enemies sensed weakness, and the weight of the secret grew too large to carry alone. To understand this story fully, you have to see the city through both their eyes. For her, every corner held a memory of betrayal, loss, and the small victories that kept her alive. She wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor navigating a maze of pain and resilience. For him, the stakes were even higher. One wrong move could unravel everything, the trust of his peers, his business empire, his freedom. And as the days slipped by, the lines between predator and prey blurred, creating a complex dance of manipulation and courage. But the story doesn't end there. Beneath this central conflict, other stories quietly unfold. Stories of friends who once abandoned her, strangers who might be allies in a world that's as unforgiving as it is unpredictable. There are moments when hope flickers, when trust is tested, and when secrets buried deep refuse to stay hidden. And just when you think you have a handle on who's right and who's wrong, a new twist emerges. Someone from the man's past, a ghost long thought gone, reappears, threatening to expose truths far more explosive than anyone imagined. Each chapter of this story peels back another layer of a city built on appearances and lies. It's about power, survival, and the human spirit's unexpected strength. The girl's voice, once ignored, begins to gather strength in whispers and glances, reaching ears that might just change everything. And the man, for all his power, finds himself trapped in a game he can't fully control. A game where the rules are written in shadows, and the only certainty is that nothing will ever be the same again. As you watch, you'll see how the delicate balance of control teeters. On the edge, you'll feel the pulse of fear, the thrill of defiance, and the weight of a truth that no amount of money can silence. So keep watching, because this story is far from over, and the next chapter might just reveal the secret that will turn everything upside down. The fragile peace that had held since their uneasy agreement began to shatter in ways neither of them could predict. The man's veneer of control started to crumble beneath the weight of secrets, whispers, and the relentless gaze of a city that never forgets. It wasn't just about silencing one voice anymore. It became a battle for survival, power, and ultimately, truth. Days bled into nights filled with restless anxiety, and every interaction held the potential for exposure. The homeless girl, who once seemed powerless, began to feel a shift in the air, an awakening that maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't as impenetrable as it seemed. Behind the man's polished doors, tension grew in the halls where deals were made and fortunes shifted. Allies who once nodded in agreement started asking uncomfortable questions. There was unease, a crack in the armor of his reputation. He had spent years carefully building his empire, but cracks showed where trust was, fragile, and the shadow of scandal loomed. The subtle glances exchanged between his closest advisors spoke volumes. Something was coming, something that could topple the carefully constructed illusion of power. Rumors began to spread quietly through the city's elite, like a storm whispering, on the horizon, threatening to tear down the man's fortress. Meanwhile, the girl's life grew more complicated in ways no one saw coming. What began as a desperate acceptance of money for silence evolved into a tangled web of new relationships, unexpected allies, and dangerous enemies. She was no longer just a bystander in the man's world. She became a force of her own. Among the shadows, a few people who had once ignored her started to take notice. There were those who saw the truth behind her eyes, pain, resilience, and an unwavering will to fight back. These new players, some driven by empathy and others by their own hidden agendas, began weaving their threads into the unfolding drama. Each encounter brought new questions, each conversation a possible betrayal. But just as the tension reached a boiling point, an unforeseen twist blindsided everyone. A figure from the man's past, someone presumed gone, someone whose name was never spoken aloud, returned with a vengeance that no one anticipated. This person held a secret so explosive that it could not only destroy the man's empire, but also alter the course of the girl's life forever. The revelation wasn't just a threat. It was a seismic shift, sending shockwaves through the fragile balance between power and silence. Suddenly, the game wasn't about money or control anymore. It was about facing the ghosts that no amount of influence could hide. The city, with its glittering skyline and dark alleyways, became a battlefield of whispered conversations, coded messages, and hidden cameras. Every move was watched, every word dissected. The media began circling like sharks, hungry for a story that could bring down one of the most untouchable figures around. Social media buzzed with speculation, hashtags trended, and public opinion swayed like a pendulum. The man's carefully curated public image was at risk, and the girl found herself at the center of a storm she never asked to be part of. Their lives, once worlds apart, were now dangerously intertwined. Adding to the complexity, the girl discovered fragments of a larger conspiracy, layers beneath the surface that hinted at corruption, cover-ups, and betrayals far beyond her personal experience. Friends she thought she could trust revealed hidden motives. Strangers offered help with strings attached. The lines between friend and foe blurred in a city that thrived on secrecy and deception. The girl's determination hardened. Her silence was no longer for sale, and the stakes had never been higher. Every step she took could bring her closer to freedom or push her deeper into danger. In the man's world, paranoia grew. The unexpected return of his past adversary ignited a series of calculated moves and desperate attempts to regain control. Behind closed doors, decisions were made in hushed tones, plans to discredit, to intimidate, to manipulate the narrative. But with each attempt to silence the rising storm, the man found himself sinking deeper into a trap of his own making. His power, once absolute, now felt fragile and fleeting, like sand slipping through his fingers. The more he fought, the louder the truth seemed to echo. What neither of them realized was that destiny was no longer a passive force. It was an active player. The girl's voice, once almost drowned out by society's indifference, began to resonate with others who had been silenced. Her story inspired quiet rebellions, whispered alliances, and a groundswell of support that threatened to upend the established order. Meanwhile, the man's allies began to question their loyalty as cracks appeared in the foundation of their shared empire. The tension reached a fever pitch, and the city watched with bated breath, waiting for the inevitable reckoning. This chapter of the story leaves us at a crossroads, where power and vulnerability collide, where silence is both a weapon and a prison, and where the line between victim and victor blurs into something neither expected. The twist has changed everything, and the stakes have never been higher. What will happen next? Who will rise, who will fall, and which secrets will finally see the light of day? Keep watching, because the next moves will shock you, and the answers you've been waiting for are just around the corner. The moment of reckoning arrived like the sudden crack of thunder after a long, uneasy silence. The man who had tried so hard to control the narrative now found himself cornered not just by the truth, but by the very people who once bowed to his power. His world, built on whispered threats and silent deals, was unraveling faster than he could manage. The homeless girl, once seen as a mere inconvenient secret, had become the catalyst for a movement no one saw coming. She stood not just as a symbol of defiance, but as the embodiment of every silenced voice ready to roar. As the media spotlight turned fierce, shining light on every shadowed corner of the man's empire, those who had hidden behind his influence began to distance themselves, their loyalties shifting with the tide of public opinion. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface exploded into a full-blown confrontation, where words were weapons and truths cut deeper than any blade. In the heart of the city, a public hearing was convened, a place where power met accountability, and the veil of secrecy was finally torn away. The homeless girl, now supported by a coalition of activists, journalists, and everyday people who had found courage through her story, stood before a crowd that hung on her every word. Her voice, once barely a whisper, now resonated with clarity and strength, cutting through layers of deceit. The man sat opposite her, stripped of his usual bravado, forced to answer for years of manipulation and hidden cruelty. The air was thick with anticipation, as decades of silence and oppression faced their first real challenge. It was a moment that transcended their personal conflict, reflecting a broader fight against injustice and the abuse of power that countless others had endured. Yet, just as the hearing seemed poised to mark the end of the man's reign, the unexpected happened. A figure who had been lurking in the background, watching and waiting, stepped forward with evidence that none could have predicted. This twist changed the entire game. It revealed that the man's downfall wasn't simply a matter of personal failings, but tied to a deeper conspiracy involving others far more powerful and dangerous than he had ever been. The revelation shocked everyone. It exposed a network of corruption that reached into places no one dared to look before. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about one man or one girl, but about an entire system desperate to protect itself from exposure. The girl, in the eye of this new storm, showed a resilience that surprised even her fiercest supporters. Instead of backing down or retreating, she embraced the challenge, becoming a beacon of hope and determination. Her journey from silence to voice had transformed not only her own life, but ignited a spark that inspired many others to speak out. The man, stripped of his power and influence, faced the consequences he had long avoided. But even then, the final twist revealed that his own downfall was only the beginning of a larger reckoning that would ripple far beyond their story. The city itself seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief and cautious optimism, as those who had felt powerless found new strength through shared courage and solidarity. As the dust settled, the subplots that had woven through their lives, betrayals, hidden alliances, struggles for redemption, found their resolutions. Allies became friends, enemies were confronted, and the fragile bonds of trust were slowly rebuilt. The girl's life began to change in ways she had never imagined, not through wealth or fame, but through the reclamation of her dignity and the knowledge that her voice mattered. The man's story ended not with a final victory, but with a reckoning that served as a warning. No amount of money or influence can silence the truth forever. Their intertwined destinies left the audience reflecting on the power of resilience, the importance of standing up against injustice, and the unstoppable force of a voice once freed from fear. In the end, the story wasn't just about scandal or secrets. It was about inner strength, about the human spirit's refusal to be crushed by cruelty or silence. It reminded everyone watching that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes, and with it, the chance to rewrite the future. The city, once shadowed by lies, now stood on the brink of a new era, where transparency and hope could finally take root. The final unexpected twist, a revelation that connected the dots between past and present, victim and victor, left the audience in awe, a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest surprises come when we least expect them, and that every story, no matter how broken, holds the potential for redemption and change. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.